I'm Sara Rinfret. I'm the small section chair from the University of Montana, and we have two awesome speakers today. Our focus is just on exploring pathways. So we did a survey at the beginning of the year just to kind of gauge what folks would like to hear about. And so we have Dr. Brent Steele, who's a professor of political science and the director of the public policy graduate program at Oregon State University. And he teaches courses in science policy, public policy theory, rural policy, climate change politics, and energy policy. And he's also the founding and executive boards for Vote Smart, a nonpartisan and nonprofit voter education organization. And then we also have Dr. Kathryn Webb Farley. She's the MPA director at Appalachian State, where she joined the faculty in 2014. And she also was a recent presidential management fellow, a senior budget analyst, mostly with the Department of Transportation. And her research interests are mainly focused on the different ways to engage with nonprofit and hybrid organizations, particularly through philanthropy. And so when she's not working, she likes spending time exploring the Blue Ridge Parkway, which I've also been to, which is beautiful. And so what we are going to do today is Dr. Steele is going to start us off. He's going to talk for about 15 minutes or so, and then Dr. Farley, and then we'll open up for questions. So just save questions for at the end, but just thanks so much everyone for being here, and we'll get started. So we're going to start off with Dr. Steele.
Okay, let me pull up. I got a PowerPoint here. Okay, can you see that? All right. So to sort of begin with, I'm going to tell you that we don't have one right now. We are in the planning stages right now. And so one of the reasons I wanted to have a session like this is to learn from others that have had it or are thinking about doing it, and what the problems are, what the benefits are, and how to go about doing it. So this is relatively new at our university. It's the last 2 years. And to start out with, we're on a quarter system. So when I start talking credits, we're talking about quarter credits, not semester credits. And our program, the current program we have, allows seniors to take up to 12 graduate credits and have them at the graduate level, courses at the graduate level, and have them apply to a graduate program if they are admitted. And in a quarter system, in our system, that 12 credits is just equivalent to one full-time quarter of graduate coursework. So could not be a 4+1 here. It would be like 4 + 1 2/3 kind of a program here. There is the Graduate Council did propose moving to 22 credits and passed it, but it's stuck at the registrar's office right now because of some regulations that they're looking at the federal level, but hopefully they'll be able to move to a possible 22 credits. Our MPP program is 62 credits to meet the NASPA standards. And so most of the other programs on campus are 45 credits. So for 45 credit programs, it really could be a 4+1 program, but for ours, no. And how it works here, once an undergrad student has completed about 105 credits, which is typically winter quarter of their junior year, they apply to the accelerated master's program, and they must have, according to the graduate school here, a cumulative GPA of B or higher, and they must go through the normal admissions process for that particular grad program they're applying to. And then if they're accepted in their senior year, they can take graduate level courses and have them count towards their undergraduate degree, and also transfer up to 12 credits towards their master's degree if they're admitted to the program. So once again, that would be equivalent to one full-time quarter. Here's some of the details in the program here that frequently asked questions that the grad school puts out. Post-bac students do not qualify for an accelerated master's program at OSU. The A&P courses are eligible for undergraduate financial aid, but not graduate financial aid. And on their transcripts, the courses will appear at the level of their course. So for an undergraduate, you'll be the 100, 200, 300, 400 level. And for the graduate courses, for a master's level, it would be 500 credit. And the 500 credits would appear as on their graduate transcripts as well. They must, all courses completed prior to the term of full admission to grad program will appear as transfer credits on the program of study. The undergrad students in these programs, A&P programs, are not eligible for graduate assistantships. And the courses they take at the graduate level, they'll only be charged undergraduate tuition, not graduate tuition. Currently on our campus, these are the programs that have accelerated master's programs. And I interviewed all the directors of these programs to find out how things are going. The size of these programs are anywhere from 2, which is in applied economics, up to about 30, which is in the computer engineering program at this time. But once again, these are all relatively new in the last 2 years. I asked them the reasons that they adopted the program. And the first one, so one of the things, we're in a small college town, Corvallis, of about 60,000. We are not near a large metropolitan area. We're 80 miles from Portland. We're about almost 60 miles from Eugene. Of course, Eugene, Oregon has the University of Oregon, so there's not going to be a large market there. And then we're about an hour from, about 45, 50 miles from Salem. So for our resident students, we have to attract them to town. And so so a lot of the program leads that I talked to from the Accelerated Master's program said this is a really good way to attract high quality undergraduates that are already here. And it lowers the uncertainty and the risk in admissions because they know what they're getting. So that's a benefit there. Some of the programs said that that the numbers of the applicants for the grad programs have actually been in decline the last few years. And so this is another way to make sure that they have students in their program. They also said that it saves time and money in recruitment to a college town, so they don't have, because the students are already here, and I guess that was implicit what I just talked about. They also talked about how it saves students money to attain a graduate degree, and so it's beneficial for the students. And then several of the programs said that it also, the students coming in their program have taken their undergraduate work, and so it allows for more advanced coursework due to previous undergraduate work. So for example, in the applied econ program, they've already had intro and intermediate micro and macro, and so it really accelerates the kinds of courses that they can take at the graduate level. But those were the 4 main benefits that I got from the interviews. For us, I'm in a school of public policy, so we formed about 9 years ago, and we were the departments of economics, Department of Political Science, and Department of Sociology, which all cooperated on our MPP program, and we formed a school of public policy. And we currently have most of our programs are online and on campus. So we have a BS in economics, a BA, BS in political science, both on campus, online. We have a new BS in public policy that started this year. We have a BA, BS in sociology, and then we have our MPP program, which is 18 years old. It's been on campus, but a year before last, we went online with that program. We just started an executive MPP program this winter, which is growing like crazy. And then we do have a PhD program. So those are the kinds of programs we have. We are in the process of developing pathways for our undergraduate program. So economics and political science and public policy and sociology. And then we also have been contacted. We have a BS in sustainability on campus, which is a really intense degree with excellent students in it. And a lot of students has a capacity to double major. And so they are very interested in having a pathway into the MPP program. How we're going to we're planning this is that students that are admitted to the program, so they'd have to be admitted by our admissions committee. They could take 12 credits, so that would be our classes are 4 quarter credit classes, and so we would allow them to take 12 elective credits to apply to from their degree programs to apply to the MPP program as electives. So classes that could go into one of the 7 concentrations we have. So you could take classes, for example, in energy policy or crime and law policy and sociology, and have them apply. The BS in sustainability has a lot of interdisciplinary coursework, so they actually could take courses, grad courses in economics, political science, and public policy or sociology, and have them apply. Some of our elective courses are what we call slash courses. So they're offered at the 400/500, and so you'll have like seniors and master students in the same class. So we would have the students, if they took a slash class, take the 500 version. I did just a recent survey of undergrads in our in our programs or undergrad programs just to see level of interest. And the first question, I didn't put this on here, is no interest. So if they said no interest, then we just didn't do the survey. But this is we have about 1,000 total undergraduates in our programs right now. And I had a kind of an outline of what the program would look like, and talked about how many credits you count. And then we just asked them what their level of interest is. And this is what we got back. So far, very interested, about 18% interested, about 47% some interest. So there is some interest here. We asked them also why they would be interested in pursuing a program like this. And obviously the top one was to attain a job. That was about 64%. To gain expertise in a content area, 42%. You know, they could pick. We had them rank order, so these are people putting these as 1, 2, or 3 as their choice. But you can see that getting looking for a job is probably the biggest driver of this. And so that's where we are right now. So I'm going to be interested in if other people have these kinds of programs. I attended the NASPA panel the year before last. On pathway programs, and heard a lot of positives and some caveats. It'll be interesting to hear if other people have experience with this. The other pathway that we do have that's been very successful is we have a variety of graduate certificate programs on campus. I have a list of them here. And we actually, for our MPP degree, we allow students to use one of these for their concentration. And concentrations are 16 credits, so these a little bit more, but students can double count credits in a graduate certificate at OSU and on their program of study for their master degree or PhD program. And so we've been allowing students to, a lot of these are in forestry and environmental, because that's kind of the emphasis on our campus. We also have, working with Portland State, has a collaborative governance certificate that's offered online, and we have a couple students doing that. But what we've been finding out is a lot of students, for example, in the rural policy and the energy policy, are graduate certificates we offer from our school, that students have been enrolling in these, and then they get 18 credits or something, and then they start looking, well, it's not that many more credits to get a master's degree. And so we have about 1/3 of our new students in the last 2 years have been coming through a graduate pathway so far. So it's been pretty successful. And that's about all I was going to talk about at this time.
Thanks so much, Brent. And we're going to transition over to Kathryn next, and then we'll open up for questions. But thanks, Brent.
Thank you, Sarah, for asking me to do this, and Brent for all the information you shared. I'll share a little bit of the perspective from a program who's been doing this for a while now. We are in our 6th year of graduating students who came through our accelerated admissions program. So I'll talk more about what we've actually experienced as a public administration program. So I'm going to share just really quickly a brief overview of our program and how this works. So for accelerated admissions, you can earn up to 12 semester credit hours of credits that may double count towards both your undergraduate degree and the 42 semester credit hour MPA degree. Like Brent said, some of the reasons that students choose to do this, or things that we market, are that you pay the cheaper undergraduate tuition rate for those classes that you take as an undergraduate student. It shortens your time to degree by 1 to 2 semesters, and I'll come back to that at the end. Boone is a lovely place. It's behind me, a picture of it in the fall. If you can stand cold winters, Boone is otherwise a gorgeous place to live. So students like to come here and stay here. And then we also, another thing that attracts students about it that I didn't put up here is there's no GRE requirement or entrance exam requirement when you have you meet the eligibility criteria. So those are some of the things that help us market this to students. Students who have a 3.4 or above GPA and 90 credit hours are eligible for the accelerated admissions program. So I'll talk a little bit more about about how that works for us. So we are getting about 25 to 30% of our admissions each year from these accelerated admissions programs. We also have other pathways, including a graduate certificate in our program in nonprofit administration. And we also have some dual degrees with particularly the business school that brings students to us. But this program brings more additional students than those other ones. And so we are targeting mostly our departments majors. We're one of the largest departments in the College of Arts and Sciences here. We have criminal justice, political science, and public administration as undergraduate. Public administration is a concentration within political science. So we target most of those majors. And we're also starting to work with the graduate school to more broadly make other majors aware of us. Students like those in social work, sociology. We have some students over in public health that are interested in our degree, actually. So we're starting to make it more broadly known that we have this accelerated admissions program, and we will allow students from other disciplines who are undergraduate students in other disciplines, in other words, to come into our program as an accelerated admissions. We have some departments on campus where you must be one of their undergraduate majors. So I would say that's something people want to consider. The mechanics of it are that the MPA director, the student, and the undergraduate advisor, whether that be in our department or in the future in other departments, have to agree which classes can double count towards both the undergraduate and the graduate degree. We don't have a certain list of classes. We have ones that we know usually where we can sub them in, but we don't have a particular list of classes that we hand to students and say, take one of these and it'll substitute here. We work individually on a student basis. The most common way that we are able to count classes are through free electives. Or electives that are prescribed, but maybe those dual listed program or dual listed electives that are both undergraduate and graduate classes. We call them dual listed courses. And so students must take that graduate level course for it to double count. And then also we just do a lot of substituting in places where it makes sense for the 5,000 level class to count for a different topic that's related. So we also have to think about when we start this recruiting process, because I just mentioned that where we count those classes, we have to think about it, and we have to be pretty creative sometimes, because if we get students that don't come and talk to us until right before their senior year, that 90 credit hours when they're eligible, they haven't saved electives, then that's when we have to start getting creative about, well, where can we actually substitute this and it actually makes sense. So we're trying to start earlier in their undergraduate experience to get them thinking about this. We actually start recruiting at about 70 hours. We get a list of everybody who's eligible and has a good GPA at 70 credit hours, and we invite them to information sessions and say, let's start talking about this. Or during advising, their advisor will say, you need to start thinking about if you want to go on to graduate school. And if so, we have these accelerated admissions options within our department. And so I would recommend starting to recruit early so that they can save some of those electives in the advising process, and where they can fit classes in. It makes a lot of sense to everybody. The other places that we go to recruit these people or these students we go to related classes. We have an intro to PA class that we go and we talk to students in. We go to some of our national government classes sometimes, and just by nature of having graduate faculty in undergraduate courses and teaching them, I have a lot of our undergraduate faculty doing some of the recruiting. So I would say I talk to 3 to 4 students a week who might be interested in accelerated admissions, or I have emails with them. We are a program that is in 3 locations. We actually have distance ed cohorts in about an hour and a half, either south or east of us. And so those programs are all for in-service students. So these students are going to be ones who stay in Boone. In Boone, we mostly have what we call pre-service students, or those, in other words, who are coming straight out of undergraduate into a graduate program, or have only worked 1 or 2 times and come back to school full-time. We are experiencing a little bit of change in Boone because the state of North Carolina did, at least I think, public administration programs a favor and told university personnel at state universities that they can take up to 3 classes a year that will be paid for by the university as an employee benefit. What that means for us in Boone is that we're getting more in-service students into our programs, including in one case, an associate dean has decided they want to get an MPA degree. So it's, whereas before you would have thought about putting seniors in classes with first-year master students or second-year master students, and that might not seem like that much of a difference. In some cases where we now have classes where you've got significant students with significant experience coupled with students who are seniors in college, and that, you know, as faculty, that changes a lot of the dynamic of the classes. And so think about that and who's in your classes, I would say. So some of the other, does anybody have any questions before I go into some of the other considerations and things I've seen as kind of issues that you have to think about? Okay, so that's kind of how we recruit them, who we're getting in, and how we run the program. Some of the things that I would say to consider are the naming and framing of it. So Brent talked a little bit about that you couldn't actually just do the MPP degree in an extra year. I would argue it's the same for the MPA degree, or should be the same. We can have students count up to 12 credit hours of double count up to 12 credit hours. That means they have 30 hours of coursework left for the MPA degree, including a 6 credit hour internship that's typically done over the summer. So undergraduates who are in the program, what I've noticed, most of them will listen to me and understand that at the graduate level, you only want to take 9 semester credit hours of work a semester. Otherwise, at the midterm and end of the semester, you regret your life choices, because it's particularly difficult to do more than 3 classes of graduate coursework and do it all well and take it all in. It's also particularly difficult to engage in that networking that we, in particular at App State, find to be so important that we included in our assessment procedures. We have an extremely strong alumni association who supports us and comes back and supports our students, and we send them to conferences with our alumni, and we really believe that one of our strengths has been the networks that are built in graduate school. When students are coming in with 12 credit hours, they think, well, I can just continue to do 12 credit hours because my mindset is 12 credit hours is a full-time student, and it's not that hard of a full-time student, without really understanding graduate school. So I'm starting to get students, 1 or 2 a year, who will say, nope, I'm taking 12 credit hours each semester and I'm going to be out of here in a year. They don't tend to do as well in classes, and they definitely are not building those networks as well as they should. So I don't call it ever a 4+1 program, although some of, including another master's program in our department in political science, call theirs a 4+1 program. Instead, I call it accelerated admissions, and I'm careful never to call it 4+1 and argue that nobody should, because we got to make the student learning objectives the most important thing. And if it's an extra semester in school, that's okay. Let's call it accelerated admissions and leave it at that. So that 42 credit hours, then it can be completed in a year and a half, in my opinion, in the best scenario. The other thing is that the students need to understand that they've got to be integrated into these graduate programs. Again, going back to that culture and thinking about your classrooms and what your faculty are experiencing in the classrooms, I would say, think about how is this going to change the culture of and nature of your classes. Are there particular classes where it seems better? So those dual listed classes, for example, are ones that I think are the best place to fit in these undergraduate students who are taking are accelerated admission students, because it's just a more natural fit for them. The other thing that I would say from a MPA director standpoint is that you have to start thinking about your course offering schedule. So if your program grows large enough, first of all, you may have more students, and how does that change your need for additional sections of a class? Also, we had to realize that we had traditionally only graduated students in spring. But now you've got students coming in and they're going to finish up in fall, and it's a significant enough number of them, 7 to 10 students even, that are going to require you to run your capstone course or whatever your capstone experience is, whether that be qualifying exams or whatever that is. You're going to have to run that course in the fall. So there are some implications for costs, I would say, in terms of faculty time and where you're going to put them. And the last thing I'll say is make sure you work with your financial aid office. For a while, for a few years, even up until last year, the financial aid office would tell students who are undergraduates who had 9 credits of undergraduate coursework, and then they were at a full-time student status because they had 1 graduate course, for example, but it wasn't counting towards their undergraduate degree, but was going to count towards their MPA degree. The financial aid office would look at that and say, nope, sorry, they've only got 9 credit hours of undergraduate coursework that's required classes. So they're not a full-time student, so we're not giving them financial aid. It took the graduate school finally working with financial aid to make them realize this is a required class. It's a required class for the graduate program which they're going into. And so therefore they are still eligible for financial aid. I don't know if that'll be a problem at your institutions, but it was something we had to work through. I can tell you my first semester as MPA director, I had a student who was in that very situation, and financial aid said, well, he has to be a full-time student and he has to have all classes that are required. So make him retake a class for grade forgiveness. You know, this is a good student who had above a 3.4, so there weren't a whole lot of classes he could even do better in. And so he ended up retaking one that he had gotten an A- instead of an A in, just so he could have full-time status. And it was at that point the graduate school realized they needed to step in and do something, because that's not fair to the student. So, you know, I'll stop there, and those are kind of my horror stories. But, you know, I think there's a lot to think about. It's not just we're going to be able to get more students in. There are some costs for the program.
So thank you both so much for sharing. And so we're going to just jump in for questions. And I think that Ray, you had a question for maybe Kathryn or Brent. So Ray, do you want to ask your questions? And folks can just feel free to put it in the chat box or raise your little blue hand. I think we're all familiar with Zoom now. So Ray, did you want to ask your question? Or I can read it. I guess just for both, you know, since undergrad and grad students are mixed in a single MPA, MPP course, how are these 2 sets of students evaluated?
We have to, so on our syllabus, we have to have requirements for all students, and then there has to be an additional, at least 3 hours a week work for graduate students. So typically there's a paper required, a much more in-depth paper required, and extra readings, extra books in all of our classes. That's how they do our slash classes.
Yeah, it's the same if there's a dual listed class in this and you have students enrolled in both the graduate and undergraduate level. The undergraduates do less work than the graduate students, and you have to show in your syllabi what extra work the graduates are doing. And so if it's in the course catalog in particular, it gets lots of scrutiny from all of our academic policy committees to make sure that the graduate students are doing enough extra work. But if a student is an undergraduate accelerated admission student and enrolled in that graduate coursework, there is no difference in the undergraduate accelerated admission student being evaluated from another graduate student. If you're enrolled in the graduate class, the assessment's the same.
What other questions do we have if folks want to jump in?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Aaron.
Hey, how are you? So my question is with accreditation, how did you all, not for NASPA so much so, but like SACS accreditation, how are you doing what are you doing in regards to the PhD students in the same courses with because we have PhD students that take some of our master courses. So how do you teach a PhD student and a master student and an undergraduate in the same course? Like how are you all doing navigating those dynamics?
We don't have a PhD program, so I'll let Brent talk about what they might have.
Yeah, so that issue's come up. So we have, so we admit students in our PhD program with all different kinds of master's degrees. and some of them have to come in and they don't have the like the microecon background, and so they take some of the MPP courses for prereq courses for the PhD. And what we're planning on doing is we're offering two sections of each of those required core MPP courses. And so what we're going to do is we'll have one section where we'll have the PhD students in that need the prereq with the MPP students, and then the other course, you know, we've been talking about having some MPP students in with the seniors, but there's a lot of discussion about that yet, because then the faculty feel it's not fair for the students that have the undergrads in their class with them. So we're still in discussion on that. That's a big issue. I don't know if anyone else can answer that too. Or have an experience with that.
Please do. If anyone can help, I'll be interested to share the information with my faculty.
It looked
Yeah,
like
does anyone
Charles
have-
might have raised his
Yeah,
hand.
Charles.
Thank you. I appreciate this.
The number,
We have our first early entry students
I
now
think there
going.
are two Charles. I'm sorry. I saw two Charles going, Mitchell and I didn't know which one.
Sorry.
Let's do Charles Mitchell had his hand up first. So let's do Charles Mitchell first.
very good. I wouldn't ask about how it works with number of students. I mean, our MPA program has rather large classes. Like I have 19 students in my quantitative and qualitative methods class at present. It seems that if you had a large number of students, it would you'd have quite a confusion between the different levels of students who are taking the same course. Does that happen, or what size classes does it produce? Is what I'm asking.
So Kathryn, do you have experience with this?
Oh.
Your microphone's off.
I can't answer for the PhD question, but I can say for undergraduate, graduate, we cap all of our classes at 20. You may have a couple where you have 22, but anything that has a graduate designate or is a graduate level course, we cap it at 20. And so because we just don't feel like the student learning experience is the same if it's larger than 20. Again, occasionally we'll have 22, but we just cap it and say, you know, this is what it is. And sometimes what ends up happening is we have less undergraduate students. So for example, this semester we had a class capped at 20 and we had 12 graduate students who wanted to sign up for it. But there were only 10 slots designated graduate. So we just reduced, and 10 undergraduate. So we reduced the undergraduate to 8 and increased the graduate to 12. And we just say this is what it is, capped.
Yeah, we cap ours at 22, 20 students as well. But that's in the core courses. And so we offer online and on campus every, you know, at multiple times a year. And then our electives, it depends on the elective, you know, the 4/500 level courses, a lot of those are capped at about 35, and we'll usually put like 10 grad seats in it and 25 undergrad seats, depending on the nature of a class. If it's more, we have a lot of students that do environmental natural resource, and so the ratio will be different. It'll be more grad students than undergrads in the course, but we cap our core courses at 20 as well.
Sarah, may I clarify my question?
Yeah, I want to come back to our friend Aaron. So yeah, let's help Aaron answer his
Let's
question
make
too.
sure I'm clear on my question. It's difficult when you're teaching two different readings. You know, you have students in the same class taking different readings. I mean, our PhD students shouldn't be doing the same readings that our masters or even especially our undergrads. And so I want to know individuals who have experience in actually teaching the same time, different level students. I think that's what I need help with. I know I had a difficult time doing PhD and masters when I was giving a book per week in one class and a couple of articles a week, and they're similar, but these students aren't even reading the same thing and trying to navigate that. So that's my issue. I just don't even like PhDs in my courses anymore, to be honest.
I think I forgot to mention, so we meet an additional hour with the PhD students every week and have a discussion on the additional readings that they have that's different from the master students. So that's what we have to do. Okay.
Thanks, Brent. All right, Charles. Sorry, apologies. We have two Charles. So
I'm sorry about that. I wasn't hearing very well, so I'm sorry to step over you, Charles Mitchell. So I have two questions, actually. So the first one is, so you both talked about how undergrad, they get undergrad tuition, not grad tuition. But is there a graduate fee as well as the undergrad tuition, or is it exactly what they would be paying as an undergrad?
For us,
Without
it's
this
exactly the same.
exactly the same. Yeah.
What
Thank you.
other questions do we have?
Can I ask my other one?
Yeah, sure. And then Marcia.
Thank you. So our program is interdisciplinary, and we accept students from any major who are, they want to have a career in public service. And our program's still pretty new, and I'm still trying to get the word out so other departments know what it is. So when we do have an early entry student, and I'm working with that advisor to figure out what courses to substitute. Any advice you have for approaching other departments, getting the word out throughout the university?
I can tell you, we're starting to do this. First, some of our classes are gen ed classes. And so those that are and have students from other classes, because our faculty are talking about them, they hear that there's this career in public service and there's a degree I can go get. And so the students will approach me. Otherwise, we have a graduate directors meeting every month that the graduate school hosts. And so we talk a little bit about it there and get to know each other so that the graduate faculty or the graduate directors know where the accelerated admissions programs on campus are and what some of the differences in those programs might be. But really, we go out to the audience instead, right? The target audience and the students. And so we're starting to work with the graduate school to host info sessions about all of the different types of accelerated admissions programs that are available. And so graduate directors come and talk to students who are interested, and students feel like they can come and they can hear about it and how their major may be able to fit into, and how their major requirements may be able to allow them to do this accelerated admissions pathway. So kind of, and that seems to me to be more fruitful, to let the students hear about it, you know, make sure that graduate directors are aware so they can share within their departments, but in general, getting the word out to students. So I think that's been most helpful for us.
We also have grad directors meetings across campus organized by grad school every quarter. And so that's a good way to get the word out. And then we also offer information sessions both through our program directly and through the grad school. And the other thing we do is we have a lot of courses. We have courses from 7 different colleges as electives. So because we're a policy program and everything has policy related to it. And so we even have co-taught a course. We have nuclear engineering on campus. So we did a non-proliferation class with them, and we've done courses in forestry. And so we have pretty low silos, so it's pretty easy here to get out. But and we do allow we do have students from other programs that do take our classes. So a lot of the undergrad programs on campus allow students a certain number of credits outside of their major. So it's pretty liberal. Although we have started a new budget model, the kind of the business model, and so I'm a little worried about that. You know, people not wanting to give up credits in their major. So I'm worried about that, but that's kind of what we've done so far.
Marcia?
Yes, so first I want to thank both of the speakers. This is very helpful, and especially on Kathryn on financial aid issues, because I think that's something we try to avoid learning about, but the expectations about full-time, part-time, and packaging programs for year-round, which our MPA is, versus more of a summers off undergrad model. These seem to come up continually. So my questions are more about time and resources for this. Our university is pretty much doing a few decades worth of changes in a year or two. So we're switching our semester units on terms to embedded sessions in semesters beginning in the fall. and redesigning our courses. And tomorrow, our graduate council is taking up 4+1 programs because now the calendar will be compatible. And yet our program is still drastically understaffed, you know, kind of like a fourth of an advisor since the pandemic. And so, you know, for Brent, you know, how long has the lead time been on design? And for both of you, how is this affecting staffing for advising, counseling, your own time as a director? And it sounds like Kathryn is having to do a lot of customized work on her end.
Well, to be honest with you, planning on this, so I've been going to meetings when they have them at NESPA, and then, you know, when I talked to Sara, I wanted to have a panel like this to talk to people who have experience in doing this, because for example, one of the issues that came up at the last time we met in person at NESPA, I went to the panel, and the dean at the Biden School, University of Delaware, was talking about an unanticipated problem, is that they're pretty liberal policy on AP courses, and they had a student that had just a whole bunch of AP courses that applied to the accelerated program. They hardly had any undergraduate courses on campus at all, and so I hadn't even thought about that. And so I came back and started looking at what our policy is at our school, because I really didn't know. And so we want to go on this with eyes open, and so that's so we're still out probably a year. We want to make sure we have everything in place, and we want to make sure that we can staff it. And we've been talking about, so for example, the advising, we've been wondering about how to do that, but, listening to how Kathryn was talking about getting the undergrad advisor working with the grad advising makes a lot of sense. We've been thinking about that, but we don't know what the best model would be for that. So, but once again, just having an informational meeting like this, and then I think it'd be interesting. We talked earlier with Stacy about maybe doing a survey of programs that have these to see how they operate and how they manage, so we can get best practices in place. I don't know if that answers your question.
What other questions do we have? Or
Yeah,
Marcia, did you want to add?
Well, I think it was just that maybe Kathryn has some sense of how much of her time is involved, or staffing involved with.
Sure. I think once you get the spiel down and you realize where the problems can be, it goes much quicker, right? So, if I talk to 3 students a week, it's 15 minutes to explain what the program is and what the things that they want to think about. And then when they come back to me and they've actually done their application and it's time to sign up for classes, that's also not a hard process. I know where, particularly for our own majors, which is what we've had to date, I know where they can slot classes in on any of their undergraduate programs of study. So while they still need their undergraduate advisor approval, I tell them, here's what you need to take and what you need to ask, where you need to ask for it to substitute in or to fit into your program of study. Now write up an email and send it to both your undergraduate advisor and to me. And I can say, yes, I sign off on this if they do. And then it's a simple process. So I wouldn't say that it adds a whole lot of time. It's the same as, it's actually easier than trying to recruit somebody who's a student that might not be in Boone. And so, I think the trade-off, if I'm trying to get to a certain number of students that I'm bringing in each year, it's easier to recruit somebody who's already here and realizes there can be some benefits to it, especially not having to take a GRE exam, that it makes it easier. So it's not to say that it doesn't add some work. It's just to say that it's just different work, I think, too.
Thanks. What other questions do we have? Yeah, Judy.
So it's a very fast question. And Kathryn, I know that you're a SAC school, and one of the question I had was, is your institution making you name the undergraduate programs that can participate in the 4+ or the accelerated masters as a condition of SACs? Like, we're hearing that we have to name this, which I think is not accurate, but I'm just curious.
So you mean naming which undergraduate majors can come into the MPA program?
Correct.
No, I haven't heard that. And I mean,
Okay.
it could be at the graduate school that they are, but I would have thought they would have talked about that to graduate directors, and I haven't heard that.
Okay, thanks.
What other thoughts or questions?
Alethea had a
Hi.
question.
I do. So how does this impact NASPA reaccreditation and your self-study and your annual report? Because I know we already report on a satellite campus where we do a program, and I know how that works, where you basically add another like field within the same thing, and they're reported together. Does it work the same if you have an accelerated program? I've seen it in the self-study instructions, but I'm just trying to confirm that it looks like that's all you really do.
So we did our self-study about a year after we brought in our first student. So it wasn't really, there were only, I think there were 2 that first year. So there wasn't really anything yet to assess. Well, I think we'll have to think about that going forward. And there have been some questions that come up, like that idea that students taking 12 credit hours and finishing in a year, if networking and building those professional skills through some of the networking is part of our assessment plan. And as I mentioned, I think there might be some change there. We're thinking about how do we assess this to make sure that students are meeting the learning objectives that we've set out and growing while they're in our program, when we really only have them full-time for a year. So I think it's a good question. I think we're going to have to address some of it in our next self-study, but we're just not there yet. We got a couple years.
We're starting. We just went through our site visit last week, so.
Congratulations.
Yeah, and so we just mentioned that we're thinking about this when the site team was here, and asked them if they had any good ideas for how to assess the process. And so hopefully we'll get some feedback in our report.
We have a question in the chat. Kathryn and Brent, do you require an internship in these programs? And how does that work?
We do. Students can take 2 internships or 1 internship in our program. So you can take 1 for 3 credit hours or 2 for 3 credit hours or 1 for 6 credit hours. The reason we did that was because students who needed financial aid had to have 6 credit hours in the summer. The traditional model is that you go in the summer, you work full-time, full term. So you have to work about 40 hours a week for the entire summer. That doesn't change whether you're an accelerated admission student or a graduate student. One question that comes up is for a student who graduates in May and doesn't start classes full-time in the MPA program, should they do that internship in the middle, or should they wait until their second summer, assuming that they're going to be here and graduate in December of the next year? So in other words, be enrolled 3 full terms in a summer. That's another thing that I think we need to think about when we've talked about how we might assess that. Are students who are doing it that first summer actually able to meet the learning objectives that we've set out for the internship? I don't know if that answers your question, but we do.
So when we went online about 1.5 years ago with the MPP, the council at the school, we had a required internship. They told us we would have to make it optional because of everything that's going on. And we probably would have had to do it anyway, because almost all of our online students work full-time. And then we have, I've got students now. I've got one of my students is in the military and operates a radar station in Marshall Islands. We've got a student in Afghanistan. We've got a lot of military in the program, and so it's optional. But on our resident program here, almost every single student does an internship because most of our students want to stay here in Oregon, and it's a small population state, and you have to network. And so we have had a couple of students online talk about doing internships, but no one's done it to date yet.
What other questions, Greg?
Both of your institutions are willing to double count courses for graduate and undergraduate credit. Do you have any sense for how common that is? Because our institution has been very clear about not doing that. So when we do have a advanced undergraduate student who wants in to try a few of the MPA courses, and we've been willing to accommodate, when they do enter, if they enter the program, we then have to find additional classes for them to take because there's no double counting. And that's an interesting way to attract your own students in, and I'm curious.
I have no idea. I don't know if Stacy is on and has an idea, but I still think we should design a survey on this and see how prominent it is and what other institutions are doing. You've always been able to let undergrads take grad courses here and count the credits on the undergrad program, but the double counting, with accelerated is new just the last 2 years.
You have to be in the accelerated admissions program to double count. There are cases where we allow undergraduate students who are good, but maybe not, maybe they're at 3.39 and they didn't hit that 3.4, but they still want to take a graduate class. There are exceptions. They're very rare that we would allow a student to take a graduate class. It wouldn't double count unless they are enrolled in the accelerated admissions program.
Yeah, and we don't currently have this data, but I think that, we have an undergraduate program survey going out this summer. And I think that's a question, a couple of questions that have come up in this conversation could be part of that survey.
So I think we have time for maybe one more question. If anyone has a final question. Yeah, Dana.
Hi, I just wanted to respond to the question about 2+1 programs or 4+1 programs and like the maintenance reports and self-studies. And, in Marcia's chat comment, I would definitely bring up with your site visitors. I mean, they write recommendations at the end. They may have experienced this as well. It's also, good from a transparency standpoint. But I think anybody that's looking at this or doing it, just be really intentional about how these line up with your standards. Think about your mission and how you're serving your mission by doing this. Maybe it serves your state or your institution. It's definitely something you want to report because it constitutes a significant change in program management. But so, report it, but also think about, how maybe it brings resources in, maybe through credits if you're an RCM model, or just even with how it lines up with recruitment or diversity, equity, and inclusion standards in Standard 4. Thinking about Standard 2.1, how you're going to assess this, like Brent, with your guys' needs assessment. You guys have been very intentional about this, and that's something that you can report to your site visit team as well. And thinking about how it ties to your mission. Just don't think of these standards as silos, but as you're moving forward, just think how you're moving to a 2+ or 2+2 program aligns with all these things, and just put it all out there. And I think anyone that does that will be okay.
Thanks, Dana. All right, so I know for some of us we're running up on the lunch hour, but we just really want to thank our two panelists and for safe. I hope we're flying out of that pandemic, but just thanks and good to see everyone, and we'll be in touch. See ya.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. All right.